All right, you guys. We'll see if anyone watches. So, I introduced myself. I'm Zuri Horwitz. I'm running for Congress in Congressional District 5, fighting for universal health care, affordable housing, good union jobs, human rights, and getting big money out of politics. And to me, it all goes back to getting big money out of politics. If we don't get big money out of politics, we can't do these other things because people are completely limited, even with very popular legislation, in terms of making sure that genocide isn't happening, making sure that Medicare for all is happening, making sure that workers are paid a living wage, making sure that you have affordable housing. That just doesn't happen when the goal is profit above everything else. A little bit about me: I'm an occupational therapist. I work in nursing homes. I also am, I lead People Centered Colorado Springs, or though a lot less so now, um, because I'm running for Congress and we advocate for walkability, bikeability, transit, and affordable housing and the way that intersects. And that's all about people centered policy. So that's the same thing that I'm fighting for if I get to Capitol Hill, because making sure that the policy actually serves people rather than serving cars going fast or serving profit over everything else, just making sure human beings are thought about when we are making policy and that it serves people well. I also have volunteered up and down the ballot with a bunch of progressive candidates. Anyway, um, yeah, so we're here. Enjoy. I know it's a little thing, and we'll see if anybody shows up, but I'm grateful for anybody that sees us afterwards. I'm going to go through the questions. Sorry if I'm a little quick with this. I think this is the fourth one that we didn't get to, and if we did get to it and I somehow forgot, then I'm sorry, but I wanted to get to this one anyway. It's: what strategies do you recommend to heal the great harm sustained by our health and science agencies? And I think this is a really, really important question. I think a lot of the time we are hoping that, we're going to get rid of RFK and it's all going to go back and all those vaccine trials will go back and all of this medicine's going to go back. And I also, I do think that there are issues when you try to do science communication and you're too simple and you don't talk about the complexity of science. That there always will be side effects for some people, but the vast majority of the time it will be good for people. And, and the thing about science too that's difficult is that it's always changing. So the big issue right now is we're underfunding all these agencies. We've undermined them politically, and we don't have good reporting on science. And the best and brightest do not want to come to the US anymore because it's not worth their time. If you're in the US, you are probably going for at least a master's degree and most likely a PhD, and you are running experiments. So it does not help to have all this funding for experiments that was happening, and now you're not getting that funding anymore. So you came here with a PhD, you came here with experiments, you came here with a thesis, you came here with a plan, and halfway through or 2 years in, they cut off all that funding. That kills your research. That does not work well. So I think it's really, really important to understand that we have to be a steady place for people to go to. People have to feel safe here. People have to trust the government here. And we do that by making sure that our government is functioning and that checks and balances are happening. And then fully funding all those agencies, giving them another, huge blow was the Chevron doctrine, which says that judges can decide whether um, whether these departments um, are taking science and interpreting it like laws and interpreting it correctly. But they're not experts in those areas. There's a reason as legislators why we would want to have a law with a basic goal and then hand it off to the people that are experts, because I'm not an expert and I just can't be an expert in everything. And that's even more so for a judge. So we want to say, this is the goal, this is what we're working towards. Now you interpret it because we trust you and we know that you have a lot more knowledge than us and a lot more time. Like, we only have 435 people in the House, and hopefully my memory is right. And they just don't have the time when they're there to be doing deep scientific research. I'm always going to try to research. I'm always going to try to have people that are experts, local experts, community members that I'm talking to, but I'm just not going to get to be in depth as I need to be for these things. Sorry, I got carried away. Let's go back. Let's go to the other things. And thanks for letting me know that there was no sound. You were right. Um, we'll figure that out. It looks like there's sound now. So thanks for your time. All right. Are you accepting corporate pack or corporate money? And if so, how can we trust you are working for constituents? I think this is huge. Number of things. First off, not accepting corporate PAC money or lobbyist dollars from corporations or APAC money is the base. That's the lowest of the low. Another thing that we have to talk about is who are people meeting with, because you cannot accept that money, but a lot of that money can come from the soft side after you and your team have been meeting with people. You can do things like red boxing, putting stuff on your website for them to then post and amplify. So we really have to be vigilant, and I think we need a cultural change of what we expect from politicians. That getting flooded with tons and tons of communications and text messages might make you more suspicious than trusting somebody. And looking at their background, if they were a corporate lobbyist, are they going to really represent you in Congress, or are they going to represent their interests that they've represented in the past? Are they going to be more likely to be corrupt, especially if they're taking in a ton of money? All right. Next question. Can you give examples of how you have helped the Springs community? This is always uncomfortable because anything that you do in community. You don't get things done right away. I'll talk about a few things I've done. I work with People Centered Colorado Springs, and that advocates for people centered planning. So putting people first in policy, which is what I'd like to do. If I get to Washington, I would love to get to work on policy that really helps people. So some of the things I've done is advocate for a Safe Streets grant, where they ended up looking for different ways to make the streets safer when they're talking about design citywide for Colorado Springs. Obviously, they had to write the grant. I just encouraged, hopefully, them getting that grant. Another thing was advocating with a mother for the intersection at Peterson and Constitution when her son was killed. He was a pedestrian, and then another community member was killed as well, who worked at, with children and was walking to work. And so getting that intersection studied, and then eventually Jeff Crank did get money to fix that intersection. There's a lot of intersections over there that really need to be fixed on Peterson and Powers, to put people first, and to really be clear about making sure, is this road for people to speed on? And then do we have a way for people to safely get across it if they, live right nearby and they work at a business? Okay, so those are a few things. I've advocated for a roundabout at the General Palmer statue, still going there, and I volunteer when I can in the community. We also put up memorials around Colorado Springs, to memorialize all the people that were killed in road crashes in El Paso County the year before last. And we did a memorial. We've been doing a memorial on the steps of City Hall every year for those people. So, just trying to change the game in terms of how we think about death and acknowledge it and prevent it and make people's lives better. So that's what I've tried to do. Also advocate for people that have been have loved ones in ICE custody as much as I can, with, of course, a group of people. So there's always more to be done. There's always so much need. How are you going to hold the current administration accountable for the damage they have done to our democracy, our government, and our international relationships? That is huge. I think that is key. We cannot come here and act like it's normal. We can't just go about our business and say, oh, well, he was elected. When somebody continuously breaks the law, when an agency like ICE ignores due process, ignores people's right to life, ignores freedom of speech, freedom of the press, we need to abolish ICE. We need to impeach and remove Donald Trump. We need to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment so that the government is back with the people, so that we are trustworthy. We need to make sure that Congress people are not allowed to trade stocks, are not allowed to become lobbyists. We have to make sure that all of our all the people that are on SCOTUS, all the judges on SCOTUS are, acting in good standing, like that we're not just here. And let me get the exact wording. They're on the court in good behavior. They should not be seeing cases, and they should be removed for seeing cases where they have direct conflicts of interest. That is not in good behavior. That goes beyond the pale. So there's a lot we can do. I think having an enforceable code of ethics for the Supreme Court is really important. And then I think, impeaching and removing people that act unconstitutionally, making sure that we fully investigate the Epstein files. I think with independent investigations and multiple investigations, so that if one investigator is stopped, another one is able to fully investigate. But that's my thought right now. We don't have all the information about Epstein. We don't have all the information about people. We don't have all the files, although it looks like Congress has access to them. But we really need to make sure that people are held accountable. I think if people see that when people act badly, they are held to account, that there's accountability, it it gives you a lot more trust in the government when you say, okay, this person is not above the law. Just because they have money, just because they have power, does not mean that they can act with impunity. And I think that's really important. That's a real safety that people need to have. All right, let's keep going. Um, what is your plan for those left without health care or SNAP? Okay, well, I am for Medicare for all. These are a few things that I really like, that I think are really important. And Medicaid for all might be even better. I've been on Medicaid and it was fantastic. It was really enjoyable, really easy, very low, it was just so nice. So a few laws that would help would be making sure all health insurance companies were nonprofits, making sure that all hospitals and medical facilities, including nursing homes, were nonprofits run by medical professionals and heavily regulated, so that you couldn't, reinvest your profit into buying other things. And then it's like that money should be going to making sure staffing ratios are good, that making sure that people are paid well, making sure people have cutting edge technology. And then another policy that would be really important is making sure that services and medication have rates set every 2 to 3 years, so people know when they come in how much they're paying. And then having things sliding scale depending on how much you make, and having it subsidized by the government. Currently, we pay twice as much for worse care in other countries. So yeah. And you can ask me more questions in the chat, or I would say ask clarifying questions in the chat, because right now there's so many questions, but if I kind of sound unclear, let me know if I need to go into a little bit more depth. Um, but yeah, and then SNAP benefits need to go back to COVID levels. People are suffering in our community. Hundreds and hundreds of people in the Southeast are going to food banks. And it's not okay for people to be hungry in what should be a wealthy country that is supposed to be for first world. Um, what would you have done differently than Rep Crank, considering the relocation of Space Force? Well, I would definitely be supporting Phil Weiser in suing Jeff Crank. I think you never do well to back off with Trump. He's always going to be against you. He's always going to, look at Crank. Crank has done everything that Trump wants, and he still lost Space Force. So what's the point? What's the point in trying to appease somebody that has no morals? Like, unless you're a billionaire and you're gonna give Trump a plane from Qatar. I think that's the place he got this new Air Force One thing for himself. You're not going to matter. So might as well hold your morals close and fight for what's good, make the case, talk to Congress, talk to the Department of Defense, make a lot of pressure, explain that we've already built up here. It's a duplication of duties. It's a waste of money. It forces people to relocate who had decided that they were moving to the Springs. It makes people uncomfortable, and we need to keep it here uh, because it's better for the Department of Defense, and it's better for families who are enlisted. And it makes it so that people don't resign, so we don't have a brain drain by moving to Huntsville, Alabama. Because I will always believe Colorado Springs is so much better. But that's why would anyone want to move there? Let them stay in the beautiful mountains. All right. If you are not selected as the Democratic candidate, will you drop out or jeopardize the progressive vote by running as an independent? I won't run as an independent. It's not worth it. Yeah. All right. At least not at this time, not in this race at all. We have witnessed the mass murders of Palestinian civilians on a daily basis for over 2 years now, all while providing military aid to the body responsible for those human rights violations. What will you do to encourage respect of human rights in our foreign policy? I'll talk about this for a while. I'm half Israeli. My family lives in Israel. And this has been something I've been worrying about, thinking about since I was 4 years old, and I don't have great answers. And I think it's really important that when we deal with Israel, that we deal with Israel as the United States. You know what I mean? I represent the United States. We have money. It is not up to us to decide how Israel functions. It is not up to us to decide how Palestine functions. Whether they decide to become a a democracy in one country or not, that is not our choice. What we can say is genocide is wrong. We're not going to give money if you're committing genocide. We're going to make sure that human rights are respected. We're going to help rebuild Palestine. We can't have a genocide and support it. We are not in charge of how people want to live their lives, but we can say that this money is contingent on military funding, funding to Israel, funding to Palestine, on human rights being respected. And if human rights are not respected by Israel, then that baseline is not met, then Israel doesn't get this money. And making sure that we have a system in place and that we have routine check-ins to ensure that it's not a ceasefire in name only, but that people are really safe and their communities are safe and that they're able to rebuild their homes and their culture. All right. The First Amendment of the Constitution promises that there will not be a state religion and that we are free to worship whatever religion we choose with certain guardrails for public safety. It is set up a system where there is mutual accountability between church and state. At present, the balance is under threat. Minority faiths are seeing white Christian nationalist values codified in public schools, veiled as protections of parental rights. How will you uphold the healthy separation of church and state while serving on Congress? Well, I think a big thing is making sure that our schools respect people's freedom of religion and that, churches are not getting involved politically when that's not their job. That's supposed to be separate. And I think, just making sure that if a church is acting as a political wing, that they are charged like a political wing if they are not acting to talk about faith and need and all that stuff. So it's like, yes, if you are a church, you are free from taxation. But if you are not acting as a church, then that doesn't make sense. So we have to be really clear about that separation and understanding that we are stronger because of all of the people that live here, and your faith will be protected. You are free to worship, you are safe to worship, but at the same time, other people shouldn't be in fear because of your faith. So, making sure that we have that balance. All right. Let's see. The question is about immigration reform. Please don't make this about Republicans, as there is well documented support of inhumane and illegal practices in our immigration system regardless of party in power. There has been bipartisan failures to do the kind of reform needed for human dignity, border security, labor needs, and family unity. What will you do to push forward the bipartisan rebuilding of an effective and ethical customs and immigration service that we stop the executive order ping pong matches? Yes, I think this is one thing that has been really stupid on Democrats' part, where we try to go hard on immigration, even though we always get called soft on immigration. So we might as well just value human rights. First off, always going to deporting. Sorry, I've been talking for so long. My mouth is like mush. We're always out here making sure that we're deporting people who are, violent offenders or who are committing grievous white collar crimes. That should never change. That's, those people shouldn't be here. Let's get them out. Fine. However, there is a lot of people that came here as children. There are a lot of people that are, community members who have been here for decades, and they do not have a route to citizenship that is fair to them. And so how do we fix that? First off, I would say abolish ICE. It's so out of control. Making sure that border and custom is acting lawfully if not getting rid of people. And then making sure that we have enough immigration judges so that people can navigate the system without having like a 10-year backlog. And then making sure that if somebody isn't a violent criminal, isn't, somebody doing white collar crime, that we're making sure they don't have to be imprisoned. They can be in their community working up until their court date. So we aren't paying to hold people in we aren't paying to hold people in cells, who are just doing a misdemeanor or who are here because of asylum, and making sure that it's a fair process from whatever country you're coming from. So, that's my point of order. And then I would also want to talk to places like Cirque, who have more experience, COS Centro, that know a little bit more about the process and maybe some ways that I could fix it that gets a little more detailed. All right. Between the increased use of automated plate readers like flock cameras and AI, our Fourth Amendment rights are being eroded. What will you do in Congress to protect those rights of privacy? All right. This is a long answer. And like it's a nuanced answer. The basic is people should own the right to themselves and their information, and it should not be exploited. Here are some things that here are a few. Let me go find it. Um, I'm sorry, I'm looking through. Um, there's a few policy proposals that scientists have, yes, that scientists from the Federation of American Scientists have proposed. Those include authorization for third-party data sources by FedRAMP, expanding existing privacy impact assessments, build government enhancement for privacy enhancing technologies to increase anonymization like we already use in in census data, update COPA 2.0 to protect children's online voice privacy and AI, establish newborn DNA privacy standards, and democratize police adoption of surveillance technology. To me, it would also be banning flock from use. There's just a certain level of information that our government just does not need to have about us. And I believe those cameras should not exist and should not be out there in public. We do not need to be living in a surveillance state. And then just looking at AI, I also think whenever it comes to AI, making sure that AI is being used as a tool and not as a replacement for people. It needs oversight to make sure that it is acting ethically, that it is not lying. It has been shown to lie because it's motivated to complete the test rather than necessarily complete the test with integrity. So that's a quick answer, but it's a long question, and the more we learn, the more we'll be able to regulate it better. But we really have to be, digging in and talking to people that really work with this. And this is why we need younger people in Congress who have a better understanding of AI. So most people here are part of an older demographic. How do you appeal to young voters now and in the future? I think this is so important. We have spent way, way, way too much time going for what we call the middle, which I do not believe is the middle. We have policies for people who are truthfully just conservative and wealthy. And people are not that. People are working, people are not able to pay their rent, people are not able to pay for their groceries, people are not able to pay for their utilities, and they aren't able to pay for health insurance. I've spoken to 4 people in the past week that can't afford health insurance. Sorry, I got a hair here. That can't afford health insurance. We need universal health care, affordable housing, good union jobs. If you work 40 hours a week, you can afford to live, that you can afford a 1-bedroom apartment. This is not radical, that if you have a job, you have a living wage, that you have, that you've got paid time off. We don't need to, live to work. We need to have policy that really helps people. And I think when we talk about these things, and then we actually implement policies, people don't care about your messaging that much if when you get into office, you don't deliver. And so we have to be delivering. We have to be delivering really good things to people. Sorry. All right. Let's see. Do you or how do you support coalition building to actually affect change? I feel like I'm kind of one of those people that if there's an opportunity, I will take it if it's really an opportunity. In the end, with like the Peterson and Constitution, Jeff Crank ended up getting a bunch of money for that intersection. Whenever I do advocacy, I work with Republicans all the time. It's just, where do we intersect? When I talk to my coworkers, they all want universal health care and affordable housing. So I'm not going to go for a coalition just to have a coalition, but where our needs intersect, I'm going to work with people where I can, and figure out how to do that. If elected, how will you address tariffs? Well, get rid of them. They have existed in the past, but um, not in. We need to, like, completely strip them back, because at this point in time, they're just being. They make our country a laughing stock. So get rid of them. See where it would maybe make sense. If we have industry that is developed, but be really careful with them and make sure that if we have anything like a tariff, it's not because somebody has a vendetta, but because it's going to help people here. Okay. Can immigration policies include paths to citizenship? If a person has been in the country for 5 or more years, paying taxes, contributing to their community, could they apply for citizenship? I think there are pathways. It's just, how expensive is the pathway? How circuitous is the pathway? So making sure that it's straightforward, that people aren't stuck in it for 10 years or aren't quoted $21,000 in order to become a citizen when, they're a roofer. So yes, I think there should be there should include paths to citizenship. What are your thoughts on elected officials investing in the stock market while in office? Will you commit to no investing? Yes, I do. I will commit to no investing. I think I have $200 in mutual funds, so don't worry about me. That won't be me. But not only should we commit to it, we should ban it. That should just not be happening. That should be grounds for removal to me. Just shouldn't happen. And I also wonder if we can do that with, like, spouses as well, because I think that's also very important. Yes. Will you support the breakup of conglomerates, even to the extent of Woodrow Wilson's idea of not allowing interstate corporations, banks, and insurance companies? Ideally, this is not my area of expertise, but monopolies are a huge source of issue. I do believe strongly in checks and balances, which means I also strongly believe in competition. And when we have monopolies, they kill competition, they kill innovation. When you can't start a new company because you're just going to get bought up by whatever big fish is out there, we just don't innovate. So ideally, I would just defer to Lena Khan, and I would love her back in office and just kicking butts and making sure that let me just make sure. But yeah, I would love her back at the FTC. I will just take her lead because she's really intelligent, and sometimes you just have to go to the resource that's doing a good job. Okay, as a Congressperson, you take an oath to the Constitution, not a party. In moments where leadership conflicts with constitutional principles, free election, separation of power, rule of law, which one wins? Have you, or would you support oversight accountability when it's politically inconvenient? Yes. That is really important to me. That is one of my biggest fears, is becoming corrupt. I hate it. I think the way we have government structured right now is we put all the power into leadership. And if you see with the DHS funding, if you see with the ACA subsidies, they will have a little showy thing. And then leadership like Schumer and Jeffries will then find the people to take the fall. They will find the people that are term limited. They will find the people that are not up for reelection, and they will take the fall, and they'll just go in a circle. And then you'll notice, oh, my guy voted really well. And you're like, even though a year ago they voted for a bunch of Trump appointees, but now they seem to be doing really great. It's because it's their turn to try to look good. But we have to hold leadership to account. It can't be about just our team winning. It's about our country functioning. All right. When and how did you develop an interest in governing and politics? As a kid, I would read the paper. I loved learning about Queen Elizabeth I, Rosa Parks and Joan of Arc. Um, I've always been interested in history and how things happen and whether we have the ability to make things better and hopefully trying to make the world a little bit better. Um, it's like hopefully that we as human beings exist on this earth and can somehow make the world a better place. It's very important to me. And hopefully, what I would do in office is try to make the world better. What will you do for conservation in our parks? No mining in our parks, protecting our parks, having them fully staffed, um, making sure that we understand that they are treasures that are long lasting and that once it takes so much time after mining to reclaim the land. We have an area here that we just have been able to reclaim, but in Colorado Springs, El Paso County area, but we don't need to do that. This is a gift for ourselves and for future generations, and we must fully fund park rangers and make sure that we're not allowing mining or anything happening in our parks that is not about preserving our parks. All right. Medicare for all. What needs to be done to get this on the books? Getting people elected who will vote for it and support it and not get bullied out of it. That's what I think needs to be done. Which current or past politicians do you most admire? Yeah, I get to have my little cheesy moment. I really like AOC. I really like Bernie. I really like Elizabeth Warren. I also really like John McCain, just because of two things. He was caught being kind of scummy when it came to campaign finance, and he actually made it his mission to try to reform it. And I really respect somebody that makes a mistake and then tries to fix that mistake. And also, he voted to keep the ACA. And I think voting according to what's best for the country is the key. It's not just, going along to get along, but to make sure that people are successful. And so making sure that when we're in office, we're trying to help people. Doesn't mean we're going to always succeed, but that our goal is policy that helps people. That if I make a mistake, which I definitely will, that I can acknowledge that mistake and fix it. And that's really important to me. Okay. Social Security is in the crosshairs of this regime. What should be done to ensure this fund into which we paid will be viable? Making sure that we fund it and that we don't put money into things like ICE or overly go into private contractors at the Department of Defense, putting that money back into our government so our government is functioning rather than into private corporations that are just working for profit and surveillance and AI and are not looking to make our country better. If elected, what change would you seek to the Constitution? What can be done to prevent another autocrat gaining power? We need to overturn Citizens United. We need a constitutional amendment to make it very clear that only people are allowed to have speech and are the only ones that are protected by the Constitution. We also need to pass the ERA so that women's rights are, in the Constitution. That would be wonderful. All right. What will you do to reduce our national debt to prevent a fiscal wipeout of the US economy? So, and other people can talk to me about this because I think it's important. There is a certain, truthfully, we need to tax billionaires, we need to tax corporations, but we also are going to need to pay more in taxes. And we have become a society that thinks that we can mortgage our children's present, our children's future for our present. And we can't. We have to pay enough in taxes to not necessarily always balance the budget, but make sure that we're not sending money out, that we're not wasting it on a bloated budget, and making sure that money is going to health insurance, Social Security, to the funds that make, when they function well, that the VA is fully funded and fully staffed. And so the tax plan that I saw that I thought was a good plan is, let me go and find it. here, and I will read, because I'm here, I'm going to read it. You guys talk to me about it. It's a little intense. What it would mean that's great is that this tax plan makes it so that, and it is called Michael Gratz's competitive tax plan. It makes it so that 100 million plus people don't have to pay taxes. So it would have a value added tax, also called a goods and services tax, and this is based on other countries like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, South Africa. So, a value added tax with a broad base and single rate of 10% would be imposed. Businesses with less than 1 million in gross receipts would be exempt. There would be 18 to 24 months between enactment and implementation. Um, and that would boost the economy. The individual income tax would exempt from tax the first 52,350 of income for single filers and 104,700 of income for married couples. The head of household filing status would be repealed. Above these thresholds, tax rates would be 16, 26, 33, and 36 and 37%. The alternative minimum tax and surtax on investment income would be repealed. With these reforms, less than one third of households now paying income tax would be required to file returns. So actually, even more than I said. A 20% corporate income tax rate enacted in the TCJA is retained. All credits except the foreign tax credit and the research and experimentation credit would be eliminated, and the corporate alternative minimum tax would be repealed. The plan would eliminate the current double taxation of corporate dividends, and it may also subject large businesses, even if they are not corporations, to the corporate income tax while simplifying the taxation of small businesses. The current payroll tax will be retained. The current earned income tax income credit would be replaced with credits of 40% of wages for workers with earnings up to 5,750, a credit of 2,300 for workers earning between 5,750 to 15,906, and the credit phases out for higher of AGI or earnings above 15,906. Or for married couples with 31,812. There would also be refundable tax credits, child tax credits, and yeah. But that's just a thought. That's just an idea. Um, um, Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, that's just a thought. So, that's one way to do it, but basically making sure that everyone is paying their fair share. We actually do a lot better when we work together on things. We can't just come in here and think that, when you pool your resources, you're able to buy more together. So it's actually more efficient to pool your resources. Not that everything has to be that way. And we want to make sure that we have competition in the marketplace. But right now we don't have that. We have a ton of monopolies. All right. What is your view on ICE detention facilities in El Paso County? Do we have any now? Will more be opened or built? So far, we don't have any right now, but we do know that El Paso County Sheriff is working with ICE, and that is not great. So I would be against any ICE facilities in El Paso County. How will you ensure that our constitutional rights for all are upheld? How will the current administration be held accountable? I think I've addressed that before, so I'm not going to go back, but I think it's making sure that all branches of government are acting and are functioning. Right now, we've kind of let the executive run amok, and we haven't had any checks and balances from Congress or from the judicial branch, and that's partially because of the amount of corruption and money in there that are like, well, we put profit above everything else. Who cares? I care. The Constitution matters. Making sure it functions matters. Okay. What is your path to getting on the ballot? Do you plan to caucus? Yes, I will be caucusing. I need to get to 30%. Please support me at caucus and assembly. Super important. If I do, then you will have a progressive talking about real hard issues on the ballot. And I think ultimately we will do better when we have policies that really help people, that really make people's lives better. All right. What have you done in or for our community? I think I've answered that again, so I'm gonna go to that one. I've talked about myself enough. I feel like, I lead People Center Colorado Springs, advocate for walkability, bikeability, transit, affordable housing, and making sure that we have that infill while also not having annexations and things like that. That's what I think is important in the community. Partially, there's volunteering at places. There's so many people in the community that do a ton, and my goal is to always be in touch with people that are working and addressing need in the community, so I know what's happening when it's happening, and I know how our federal policies are affecting us locally. That's very important to me, that we stay in touch with all of these community groups. All right. Policy differences among those opposing Rep. Crank are minimal. The bigger question is, how do you plan to fight the GOP in the campaign? It must be with a strong posture. Related to that, how do you communicate to voters that topics of authoritarianism, threatening federal independence, creating an oligarchy are kitchen table issues? If left unchecked, it will lead to economic decline. Okay, I don't believe that. I think some people posture and say um, that they will stand up. I do believe that if you've ever met me, I stand up very strong when I believe in something. And I believe strongly that our economy is struggling. AI is replacing middle class jobs. We're getting rid of immigrants who the immigration system is beneficial for the United States. It is not beneficial for immigrants who work for tiny wages and then undercut other blue collar workers. Our economy is a mess right now because we are not trusted by our allies. We have to come in. We need to impeach and remove Trump. We need to impeach and remove everyone in his administration that have acted unconstitutionally. We need to, sorry, abolish ICE, and we need to just be in there. We need to make sure that we have a enforceable code of ethics, and we need to impeach and remove those on the Supreme Court who have not acted ethically. We need to make sure that Congress is acting for the people and not for big money that is getting them into office. And that includes having public options. That includes a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. That includes taxing super PACs if that's possible. That includes on the state level, having the Montana plan to make sure that we legislate corporations so that they cannot be contributing money to political campaigns. So there's a lot we can do, and we have to do it right away. And we can't come in and do symbolic things and say, this is so bad. We have to do, what is the consequence? When people have consequences, when there are standards, then people are able to meet those standards. When we don't have consequences, when we don't have rules and regulations in a certain place, in a certain way, people don't have structure and they can run amok. And that doesn't mean for everything, but people kind of have to know, hey, the Constitution gets enforced in this country. All right. What procedures would you support to implement, confirm, create that the 26 election is free and fair? I would making sure that, the truth is, we have free and fair elections statewide. What I'm fearful of is Trump posting troops and ICE agents near polling places and intimidating people, which is very, very terrifying. And the only thing we can do is be brave, protect our polling places, keep showing up to vote harder so that they can't say that something didn't happen. And then if he steals ballots, if he does anything, have an absolute work stoppage and, have everybody have a general strike. That would be the response. If he does what he did last time, we need a general strike. What kind of ICE abolished or managed? Abolished. What kind of accountability would you support for Trump, Noem, Miller, Homan, and Hegseth? They should all be removed and then tried. What will you do to guarantee universal health care? Again, fighting whenever I can for more funding for healthcare, making sure subsidies make it in, and not voting for anything that would take out funding for healthcare. And then, working with my fellow Congresspeople to create universal healthcare. To Jessica Killen, one of your priorities is reducing healthcare and prescription costs. How would you approach this? Yeah, I think I've answered that one. Have you been previously elected to a public office? I haven't. I came in because I felt like I do a ton of work locally and I felt like I couldn't accomplish that work if I wasn't, if what was happening federally was so chaotic and wasn't trustworthy. Um, are you in favor of Medicare for all, universal health care? Could TRICARE be a good first step? I think there's a lot of different ways we could approach universal health care. The truth is, it will matter who is in office with me, and I'm going to vote for universal health care and just try to make it as good as I can with whoever is in office with me, because a lot of these are big group projects. And so it's just pushing towards good policies. Again, nonprofit insurance companies, nonprofit medical facilities, making sure that we have set rates for services and drugs. With so many countries providing better healthcare for less money using universal healthcare, what do you plan to do? It's almost like people really want universal healthcare. It's almost like it's a problem. We get in office and we keep pushing. And if there's anything that's coming in there that's taking away funding, that's making it more difficult for people to access care, making it so that people are getting denied care, getting rid of that. You have stated your support to codify this is specifically to Killen, but reportedly have made a point to say you would not choose abortion yourself. Why? The right ties to legislate promiscuity as opposed to women's health, economic health. Why not claim it is a decision of faith, family, and physician, and you want the choice? And I really agree with this. I think it's actually really important to say that you're pro-choice. I don't believe that it is my place to tell somebody whether they should have a child. I don't know their life. I don't know their medical situation. I don't know what I would do in the situation. And so I think it's very much up to the person and their doctor, and that's it. And yes, you're going to consult with the people that you love and trust. But the most important thing is that women have bodily autonomy. A woman's life is worth having and being protected. And a fetus is just not a full grown person. You know, when there's a late term abortion, it is most almost 100% of the time because of medical issues. There have been too many women who have either died. Yeah, okay. Oh, either have died. I'll answer that in a little bit, John. Who have either died or lost their fertility and couldn't have kids. So the baby wasn't viable, the option was not viable, the fetus was not viable, and then they were sick, and then they were not able to have children when they were ready. All right, I'm gonna go through. Well, I can try to. Okay, I have $2, and again, it goes back to returning to funding, and I am against school vouchers. I think running things like businesses does not always work. The goal of a public school is to provide education. It is not to make a profit. Um, and so a lot of the time when we go to vouchers, it doesn't mean we don't have schools that are like specialty schools or anything like that. But I think it's really important that they're established, that they're public, that when we start to just have random charter schools in and out, they don't have the same level of protection that a public school has and the same level of oversight, and they should. So if we're funding a school, it should be a public school that we have a lot of oversight over. Yeah. Sorry, it's a quick answer, but let me know if you have any more questions or if there's something that you feel like I missed. Um, you are on your way to a fundraiser when you see an ICE raid beginning. What do you do? Pull over, start filming, whistles, and contact people that know what they're doing to get there so that they can watch and oversee, because I'm not trained as of yet. All right. What would you do to protect our right to vote? I think we've answered that with the John Lewis Protection Act. Make sure that SAVE does not pass. Make sure that our rights as guaranteed in the Constitution are guaranteed. Sorry, I'm losing a little steam here. I have spoken to multiple former colleagues at the Air Force Academy who say morale is terrible. What can you do to help? I think impeaching and removing Trump, getting rid of Hegseth, having people who are leading the Department of Defense who have actual skill and knowledge and are appropriate leaders for the Department of Defense in charge, deciding policy, that is key. That is key. Leadership of the Democratic Party have already endorsed Killen. Were the other Democratic candidates interviewed? What was the process of endorsement? No, we were not interviewed. We were not spoken with. And I think it does speak to a top bottom top down approach where somebody that hasn't lived here and was a corporate lobbyist um, seems to have been appointed by people. And yeah, so that is why I'm running. And I know other people are running for that same reason. I think it's really important that somebody doesn't come here to buy a seat, but somebody comes here to represent the people of El Paso County because they are from the community and care about the community. I was born here. Not everyone has to have been born here. My grandparents came here in, I think, 1952. And yeah, and I really love this region. How will you how will you vote on funding ICE? Will you vote for impeaching? No, I'm like paraphrasing there. Yes, vote for impeaching. No, vote no on funding ICE. There's just no reason to fund people who are killing people in the street and kidnapping people. Trump's second term was only possible because there was no punishment for his misdeeds during his first term. That in turn was possible due to a lack of accountability for Bush 43, Bush 41, and Reagan administrations. Okay. Ultimately dropping the ball on Nixon's impeachment. What will you do in office to ensure that the executive branch never again oversteps? Again, if somebody acts unconstitutionally, they should be impeached and removed, especially somebody that has acted unconstitutionally and enriched themselves while in office to the tune of billions of dollars, and then helped billionaires get trillions, like $1.2 trillion. How will you bring in rural Colorado? I think, talking to people in rural Colorado, it's a different way of living. And I think it's really important to make sure that people have clean water, they don't have PFAS in their water, that, wildfire is mitigated, that they have, hospitals and access to care wherever they are to the degree that they can. Yeah. Will you commit to holding town halls? Yes. And I think even more than committing to holding town halls, being responsive to the needs of your constituents. My goal isn't, and I'm not great at just being a listening ear. I don't want to just be a listening ear for constituents. I want to be an advocate for my constituents. I want to go to Washington, know what people need, and then advocate for their needs. How do you plan to draw on independents in your campaign? It's very funny. And I feel like I could have done even better, but a lot of the people that support me had to register as Democrats, either from being registered as a Republican, or being registered as an independent. I could have done more outreach, but so many people are fed up with the parties and they want to see good policy. And when people want universal health care, people want a job that you get paid for, that you have benefits for, that you're not scared all the time. People just don't need to be tortured all the time. Life shouldn't be this hard. Students shouldn't have to start out with debt in the world. They should be able to afford college and trade schools. Okay, when is your next town hall? We're going to have a forum at UCCS. Let me check the date. There's 2 forums. So there's going to be a forum on the 21st, the UCCS town hall, and then there's going to be a UCCS forum on the 23rd. So the February 21st and February 23rd. And I'm always happy to speak to people. So if you want to invite me, I will come. I will be there, even if I'm tired. All right, we're almost done. Will you actively support the Democratic candidate who wins the primary if you don't? Truthfully, I'm tired. I'm running because I really care about this. I will endorse the ultimate primary winner, but there's so much to do in the world. And I will do what I feel like is, going to help the most. What is your plan on holding ICE, DHS, and the White House accountable for constitutional violations being perpetuated by ICE and Border Patrol agents on a near daily basis? They need to be prosecuted, and we need to abolish ICE and look at how DHS and the White House has been acting. Yeah, sorry, these are all. There's what will you do to stop ICE? What is your opinion of Christine Holmes, DHS secretary, and ICE's behavior in Minneapolis? It's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. It's going into cities that didn't vote for Trump and terrorizing people. That is not it is a newer part of the administration. It can be abolished. We can do better than that. Do you believe in freedom for all, citizen and immigrant? Yes. And then the last one is for Jeff Crank. When are you going to hold in-person town meetings instead of your fake town halls? So I already told you we got a town hall on the 21st and the 23rd. We're also going to have a volunteer day on the 21st, on Saturday, the 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. DM if you would like to go. It will be at the Chinook Center. You can phone bank, you can make calls, do all kinds of stuff. Also, if you would like to donate, please donate. I suck at fundraising. I try to spend my time talking to people and being involved, but we do need money to get ahead. And yes, and let me know if you have any more questions. To anyone that held out this long, thank you for your time and your patience. I really appreciate you. And have a good evening. I hope I got through those questions quickly enough and with enough depth. If you have any ideas, if you have anything that you feel like I missed, let me know and I will get there. So have a good evening. Thank you for your time.